Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Know and Grow parenting series. So, this is our podcast for parents where we focus on a whole bunch of different parenting topics and we try and simplify them to the best of our ability and just give you a whole bunch of strategies and skills that you can actually implement and put into practice right now. So, I'm Tania DaSilva. I'm the clinical director of Behavior Matters, and I'm really excited for episode 2. So, in today's episode, we're actually going to talk about anxiety. I can honestly talk about anxiety for days. And I actually was diagnosed with anxiety, and I've supported hundreds, if not actually thousands, of families with anxiety support. So, children, youth, young adults, families, parents, you name it, I've done it. So, I have a wide range of tips and tricks, but today I'm actually going to focus on kind of one of my favorites and just one of the simplest strategies that I have. And I also find this to be a super effective strategy and one that kind of works across the board, no matter what the anxiety trigger is, no matter how old, the child is or the teen is. Or the adult is for that matter. So, we're going to focus in on that. And yeah, we're just going to jump right into it. So, basically, what I want to focus on today is talking about calming and coping. So, when I talk about calming and coping, I know for some people, those words potentially might mean the same thing. For me, they're actually very different. And you're going to see the difference as we go through this. So, I am going to start with calming and then I'm going to talk about coping. So, to give you kind of just a quick version of this before I actually dive into the details. For me, calming is what it means for most people. So, calming is literally emotional regulation. So, it's being able to regulate yourself. Coping for me is how am I actually going to cope with what's triggering my anxiety, right? Or what's causing my anxiety. And that typically is a problem or something I'm struggling with in terms of being able to manage something. So, when I look at coping, I think about problem solving and I think about skill building in terms of my abilities, right? So building better habits, behaviors, can be any kind of social skill, but essentially I'm building my ability or I'm building, again, my problem solving abilities as well. So that is kind of the quick version of it. And I'm going to obviously dive into this in more detail. So before I actually dive into this, what I want to highlight is the importance of the order. So I kind of want you just to imagine this, right? So let's think about a time where we were feeling really anxious, really stressed out, really overwhelmed. And again, there was a problem or something that we felt we weren't going to be able to manage or deal with. And I want you to think about, in your dysregulated state, how much more difficult was it, or probably impossible to actually problem solve for that or manage that? It was probably a lot more difficult. Or again, potentially some of you are like, actually, I wasn't able to problem solve that. I did not manage that. That was a complete, train wreck or car crash. So this is why calming is so important because you cannot cope with a problem or solve a problem or manage something if you're not in a calm state or, a semi-calm state. If you're completely dysregulated, then you are likely not going to be able to cope with whatever it is that's causing your anxiety. So this is why it is so important to first focus on calming so that we're in a better state or in a state where we can actually cope with the problems causing the anxiety. So obviously when we're thinking about, our kids are teens, and I'm sure some of this is going to resonate with you even as an adult as well if you're watching this, but especially with our kids and teens, we want to develop these skills and this awareness, and the younger they are, the better, right? Like if we're doing this when our kids are really young, we're setting them up for success. Again, if your kids are older, don't panic. Starting now is better than starting never. So we're still in a good place. So if we're thinking about what calming is, and I would suggest if you want to take down some notes on this, go for it, because this is still something that, I have notes on that I reference back all the time. So in terms of calming, and I kind of broke it down because I want to make sure I'm not missing anything, especially because this is a podcast and I want to leave you with everything and not, sign off and be like, oh my gosh, I forgot to mention that. So when we're thinking of calming, again, what calming means to me is emotional regulation, right? So this is being able to emotionally regulate as well as being emotionally aware. So obviously, those things go hand in hand, but they are also different. So to be able to regulate, we need to be emotionally aware. So we need to be aware of what am I feeling? What is going on? And aware that we are dysregulated, that we are anxious. For a lot of kids especially, there's that dysregulation, but they're not connecting to the fact that they are dysregulated, right? They're not connecting to the feeling that's associated or connected with it. So they're not, connecting to, oh, I'm nervous about this. This is why this is happening. Or if we're just talking about feelings in general, I'm mad about this, right? Or I'm sad about this. And this is why I'm dysregulated. So first and foremost, when we're thinking about calming, we need to be able to become emotionally aware. And so that obviously starts with labeling, what am I feeling? So that is the first step. So what am I feeling? Next step is how am I going to regulate this feeling? So if I'm feeling anxious, obviously we know, and most of us can probably, list off a handful of different regulation strategies. But again, I actually use regulation strategies in a very specific way. So when I'm thinking about regulation, I think about mind regulation and body regulation. And to me, again, these are very different things and need very different reactions. So again, I want you to kind of imagine this with me. So if I am feeling super anxious about something, typically my mind anxiety starts to spiral and there's a whole bunch of those what if thoughts. There's a bunch of that negative self-talk that comes up. There's a bunch of visuals. For me, I'm a very visual person. So I actually imagine, it's like an internal movie, the worst case scenario happening, right? So when I'm anxious, that is how my mind communicates with me. It communicates with me through words and through images. My body does not communicate with me that way. It communicates with me through feeling. So when my body is feeling anxious, I'm in that fight, flight, or freeze mode. My stomach might be hurting. I might be shaky. I might be sweating. I might be tense. So that is how my body communicates. So again, they communicate in very different ways. And if my mind is super anxious and I'm having all these, worry thoughts, what ifs, and I'm regulating my mind with, the appropriate mind regulation strategies. So again, that could be positive self-talk, that could be visualization, that could be, anything that fits into those categories. That's great because my mind's like, okay, like everything's okay. You got this. Like things are going to work out. But my body doesn't communicate that way. So my body is still like, you're saying all these things, but I'm still feeling uncomfortable. I'm still feeling dysregulated. So I need to make sure that I'm also giving my body what it needs. So again, that could be deep breathing. That could be, muscle relaxation. That could be, tense and release to get that tense energy out. That can be just movement, right? To get that excess energy out. So whatever it is, again, I want to obviously regulate my body in the way that it needs that. So first and foremost, you want to be able to label the emotion for your kids. And then you want to help them learn how to regulate their mind and their body and see those things as two different things that need two different things. I'm not going to get super into all those different strategies. We do obviously have our kids and teens anxiety programs that go into a lot more of the actual skills. We have our parent 8-week program, and I actually have a 90-minute one as well that we essentially kind of run every so often. If you want a shorter version, that we do touch a little bit on that as well. But if you're looking for more specific support, we can support you in different ways. So for today, I'm kind of just going to talk about it in a little bit more of general terms, but you want to think about mind anxiety, body anxiety. How am I going to first teach this to my kids as two separate things? And how are we actually going to start practicing these regulation strategies to be able to regulate our mind and our body? So again, something that I really want to highlight here, and again, imagine the sirens going off as I'm saying this. You need to make sure that you're practicing these calming strategies with your kids on a regular basis. I would stress daily, especially if they're younger or especially if you haven't done this ever with your kids and they're a little bit older. You want to literally build this into your routine. So if it's your nighttime routine, it could be 5 minutes. You're literally practicing mind and body regulation. If it's on the way to school in the morning, on your drive, on your walk, whatever, again, you're practicing them. Even if it's like a minute, you're just practicing them. But you literally are building this into your routine. You're practicing this regularly because when you are in a dysregulated state, the same way that it's very difficult to problem solve or, figure out, how to solve whatever it is that's triggering you, it is also pretty much near impossible to recall a strategy that you've only ever really learned once or that you're only asked to use when you're dysregulated. You will likely not be successful. So your kids will likely not be successful if you never practice deep breathing with them. And then when they're super dysregulated, you're like, okay, let's take a deep breath. They're in a dysregulated state that doesn't feel like, it just doesn't feel like normal to them. Like they haven't done it regularly. It doesn't feel familiar to them. So if that's what they're feeling, they're going to be like, I don't even know what you're asking me to do right now because I, don't really do this. I haven't really done this. So that is why it is so crucial to literally practice these things daily. So when they are in that state, it's easier for them to recall it because they're like, I do this every day. I actually get this. Like my body remembers this. My mind remembers this, right? So please, if you do anything, start incorporating the mind and body strategies into your routine somewhere. I find nighttime routines are typically an easier place to do this. So what we're doing with this is we're teaching our kids to connect to themselves. So we're helping them develop self-awareness where now they're starting to identify what they're feeling. They're connecting to themselves in terms of, oh, when I feel anxious, this is what happens in my mind. This is what happens in my body. And this is what I can do, or this is what I do to regulate it. So we're really building that connection to themselves. Another big part of connection, and I always kind of pop this into this calming category that I describe, but how are we building connection for them in terms of them feeling connected, seen, understood, and supported by others? So again, that's their connection with us. That can be their connection with peers, with teachers, with coaches, whoever, is in their life or in the environments that they spend time in. So you also want to build that connection, because the reality is, if we feel connected, and again, I want you to imagine this. I want you to imagine the place and the people that you feel the most connected to, right? Typically, that space or those people, we're not feeling anxiety the same way, right? We are feeling safe. And that's a big thing that we want to obviously kind of bring up in our kids, is a feeling of safety. So feeling connected to others helps us feel calm. So that's also something I want you to think about. So in addition to obviously, implementing these calming strategies, how can I help my child feel more connected, feel more supported, feel seen? How can I help them build connections with peers, with their teachers? How can they connect further with me, right? So you want to build that feeling of connection, because if our kids feel connected to other people, and if they feel like they have the ability to calm themselves down and regulate their emotions, then it's going to give them this sense of safety, right? I feel safe in my mind, I feel safe in my body, and I feel safe around these people or in this environment. And so that naturally is going to bring about that feeling of calmness. And that naturally is going to bring about this feeling of confidence, right? Where they feel confident enough to be like, oh, yes, I know what I feel. And I know how this comes up in my mind and in my body, and I know how to regulate myself. I also feel confident in the people around me, that they're going to support me and understand me. And I feel connected to them, right? So we are literally creating this feeling of safety and confidence for them, which if we actually feel safe and if we feel confident, then we're likely not going to feel anxious or not as anxious. So what we want to leave our kids with is, we essentially want them to be able to be like, you know what, I feel calm. I am safe and I see things clearly, and I'm going to stress I see things clearly, because to be able to go into step 2 and to actually cope with something, we need to be in a state where we feel calm, we feel safe, and we feel like we can actually see things clearly, so that we can problem solve effectively, we can manage the situation effectively, and not from a state of panic. Last thing here for our first section is, we also want them to feel supported. So I feel supported, I feel connected, I feel calm, I feel seen, I feel understood. These things help us feel calm, and we need to feel calm so that we can actually cope with the situation. So I want to again give you this visual. So I want you to imagine, your kids are really great at identifying their emotions, at regulating their emotions. And then, they regulate, but then they're faced with the same trigger, right? The same problem, the same situation where, for a bit, they feel more regulated. But then, as time goes on and they're like, oh, this is still a problem. I don't know how to problem solve for this. Or this is still a situation and I don't have the skills or the abilities to like manage this or navigate this. It becomes a vicious cycle, right? If they don't have the abilities that they need to navigate the situation, to problem solve, then they're going to, be calm for a little bit, but then end up again back in a state of dysregulation or chaos. So that is why this step and this category of coping is equally as crucial, because we want to give them the ability to navigate these triggers and these stressful situations. For me, when I think about coping, again, I think about two things. I want to develop problem solving in my kids. I want to develop their abilities to handle whatever that situation is. And again, abilities is a very broad term, because for some kids, maybe the ability that I'm helping them develop is the ability to communicate clearly, the ability to be more flexible, the ability to advocate for themselves, the ability to be more organized so that they're not super stressed out. So again, abilities can be a lot of different things. I want you to think about here is, what is the problem that my child is actually facing? What is the issue that's causing this anxiety? What is triggering them? And how can I problem solve for this with them? And what skills, what abilities do they need to develop so that they're able to navigate this and manage this on their own? So again, take a minute here to really think about this, because I always find this is like a really profound question and thought, right? It's like, what do they need? And so this, I know for me, as a parent, when I think about this from this lens, or when I work with parents, this always gives us a feeling of control, where it's like, oh, okay, now I know what the problem is. So I can go into problem solving mode. Or, oh, I know what's triggering them. And yes, I actually can see, the abilities that they don't have, or the abilities that they need to develop. That gives us a feeling of control. That is going to give your kids a feeling of control as well. If they develop their problem solving abilities, it gives us a sense of control. And that naturally creates a sense of security for our kids and predictability for our kids. They know, oh, when this problem arises, these are the problem solving steps that I do. Or when this happens, this is the ability that I have. So again, we're giving them that sense of security, which is super important, and predictability. So what we're leaving our kids with here as we pull this apart is if this happens, no problem. I mean, not always no problem. It takes a little while, that predictability. So I know in this situation, this stresses me out. This is a trigger. I know this is how it unfolds, or these are the things that I need to do, or these are the things that are going to happen. Again, it creates the sense of security and a sense of control. So those are the two categories that I really want you to focus on if your child is struggling with anxiety. How can I help them develop their calming strategy skills abilities, and how can I help them develop their coping strategies, so problem solving, whatever abilities they need, so that I'm creating that sense of security and that sense of safety. I'm creating that sense of control and that sense of connection, right? If our kids feel like they're in control, they feel connected, if they feel safe and they feel secure, we all know that their anxiety is going to drop. So definitely pull this apart for whatever your situations are, whatever your examples are. I want to leave you with one more thing today. So I want to give you just some super simple, 3 strategies that you can implement. And as I'm going through this, I'm actually going to relate it to how I implement it with my own daughter. If any of you were here for episode 1 where we talked about back to school prep, I have to say my daughter humbled me completely. I was so confident in that episode that she was going to do super well, that we weren't going to have any issues. She did terribly. She was actually literally the worst in her entire class. She cried the entire time, her first day, and then I want to say the 2 weeks after that, cried at drop off, cried at pickup. We're finally in a place where she is not crying at drop off, and hit or miss, last couple days, we've seen some pickups. She's crying, some pickups she's not. So things are definitely getting better, but she definitely humbled me. I did not think she was going to struggle as much as she did. And I'm saying this because I really just want to normalize that, we can have all the tips, tricks, and everything else and feel super confident. And sometimes our kids still struggle, right? They're their own people. Some of them are more sensitive than others. Like my daughter is, more sensitive, a more sensitive kid. But definitely going through this in the last couple of weeks, there was times that I was like, I am not a therapist right now. I am fully a parent. And I caught myself, saying and doing all the wrong things, even though I knew that they were all the wrong things because it was my kid. And I was just in parent mode. I wasn't in therapy mode. So I think the reason I'm saying this is I think when you're going through this as a parent, everything is easier said than done because it is your child. So I'm just going to literally give you this picture. Her first day, she was absolutely bawling. And I was like, oh, I can stay right here. I can come in, and I'm saying all these things. And I know these are all the wrong things to say. And I know exactly what the teacher's going to say to me. And it's exactly what she said, where she's like, that's going to make it worse. It's better if you just say goodbye and go. So I did. And then I tortured myself by sitting outside because the window was open and I could literally hear her crying the entire time. She was there. A short day. She was only there for an hour and a half, but she cried the entire time. And everything in me wanted to go in and take her out. And I had to, again, then remind myself, okay, that's what you want to do because you're a parent and that's your child and you love her. But what's best for her? And I'm like, nope, if I go and get her, it's just going to reinforce it. If she cries, I'm going to come back and get her. Right. So I sat and I was in all my feels and it was terrible, but I did what I knew was best for her. And again, obviously, as the days went on, drop offs got a little bit easier, pickups got a little bit easier, but we're still going through it. She's still adjusting. She is still having hard times, and that's okay. So the reason that I'm saying this is with anxiety, if things are getting less intense, if it's happening less often, that's a win. Right. Sometimes, we hope we're just going to wave a magic wand and things are going to go away and never come back. That's not necessarily the case. So what we want to know is we're learning, skills and strategies that we can implement so that we can help support it not be as intense and happen less often. And that's a win. Right. And I'm going to tell you exactly how to do that in these 3 steps before we wrap up. So the biggest starting point is you want to validate and connect. And so what I mean by that is you want to validate their feelings and you want to avoid things like, oh, there's nothing to be nervous about, you'll be fine, everything's great. That's invalidating how they're feeling. So you really want to lean into what they're feeling and validate like, yeah, I can see this is really hard and I can see you really missed me, or again, whatever your situation is. I'm just using how I did this. But with her, I was like, I know you really missed me, right? You're never away from me. Or I know you don't know these teachers. I know it's very easy to be like, oh, the teachers are so nice. They love you. Like all the kids are your friends. And the reality is, she doesn't know these teachers. She doesn't know these kids, right? So we really want to validate what they're feeling, where it's like, I know you don't know these teachers, right? Like you don't feel comfortable with them yet. You don't really know all these kids, right? You're still getting to know them. You miss mommy. You don't know if mommy's going to come back. You've never been here. So I'm really validating, her emotions, and I'm actually connecting. So again, if your kids are older and they're giving you information, then you want to connect to that, right? So you want to validate what they're saying. So if your child is like, no one talks to me at school, or my teacher's mean, you want to validate what they're sharing with you, right? That's what's making them anxious. If your kids are younger or they're not able to make that connection, which really does happen with a lot of kids, sometimes they feel the big feels, but they actually can't connect to why they're feeling them, which is why the emotional awareness piece is important. You can connect. And obviously, my daughter's a lot younger, so I am really, she's only 2, connecting that for her, or trying to connect that for her so she's hearing the language. And when I was validating, I was like, yeah, you don't really know them yet. On our drive home, she just kept repeating the same thing where she's like, Mommy, like, I don't know them yet. I don't know them yet. Right. So again, that is us validating and creating that feeling of connection, which we just talked about, right? We want to connect with our kids and we want them to feel seen, understood, and heard, right? So how are you going to validate the anxiety your child's feeling? And how are you going to help them connect to maybe why they're feeling it, right? To help them develop that awareness so they're aware enough so then we can move into actually dealing with it. So that is the first step, right? So this helps calm them. It helps them feel obviously connected, seen, understood. Again, I've said that multiple times, but that is what we want to do. And it just, again, helps them develop their own self awareness, their own emotional awareness, and it's actually going to help them be able to regulate. So, step 2, once we validated, we've connected, we've done all that, we want to move into step 2, which is helping them problem solve and obviously build those skills that they need to navigate the trigger, right? So, we talked about this as well, but you want to essentially help them feel in control and see the options and make choices with the calculated choices that you're providing to them. So, when I'm thinking about this, I always think about 2 things. So, number 1, how can I help you problem solve? Actually, I should say 3 things. How can I help you problem solve for this? Is my first question to myself, where I'm like, okay, this is what my child's struggling with. How am I going to help them problem solve for this? Number 2, what ability am I going to help you build? Right. So, how am I going to help you build this ability? And then number 3 is, where can I start? Right. So we obviously all have an end goal. I was always like, my goal is I want my child to go in there smiling, happy. I want her not to miss me while she's there. I want her just to enjoy herself, to do all the activities, connect with all the kids, love her teachers, and come out so happy. So what I look at is, what do I need to do to get her there? How do I start breaking this down? So if I'm thinking about how I did this, so what I was looking at, I'm like, what is the problem, right? What is she struggling with? So she's struggling with the fact that I'm leaving and she wants me there, right? She wants me to be near her. She doesn't want me to leave. So I'm like, that's the problem. So what I did with her specifically was, again, every day we would talk about the routine, right? So we would talk about, and we created a very predictable routine. You don't want me to leave. So what do? So we get to school, we hang up your bag, we put your water bottle where it needs to go. I give her calculated choice where I'm like, do you want to give me a high five, a hug? You want to blow me a kiss? How are we saying goodbye? What teacher do you want to go to today? Something that I also did in terms of the buildup is I actually started getting there like 3 to 5 minutes late. So doors open at 9. There's always this massive rush. And what I noticed for her, that actually made it worse. It became a lot more overwhelming for her. So I'm like, eventually I would love to just be able to be there on time and walk in on time with everybody else. But my buildup for her was, I'm going to meet her where she's at. She does better when we're the only ones walking in. So that was my first step for her. So it's helping her understand, this is the steps. This is what we're doing, right? And I'm building her ability where I'm like, you walk up the steps, you hang your jacket in your bag. You put your water bottle there, right? You choose how you want to say goodbye to me. You choose what teacher you want to go to. And so again, that's helping her build her confidence, right? And feeling like she has control over where she places this, how she says goodbye, what teacher she goes to. The other thing too that I started doing with her is, again, I know the problem was that she was worried about where I was going. So what we started saying to her is, you know what, I can't sit here. I'm not allowed to sit inside, but I'm going to sit outside on the bench. And she knows there's a bench outside. Obviously, I don't sit there the entire time, but she's 2, so she believes that I do. And that's all that matters. She knows that. So that's something that, again, I started realizing, as we were driving to school, she would constantly be like, Mommy, sit on bench. Mommy, work on bench. And so that for her was her helping herself feel secure, where it's like, I know where you are, even though I can't see you. So you want to think about, how can I create that sense of security for my child, right? Their ability to navigate, what's expected of them in the morning. How am I going to problem solve, for what they're stressed out about or what's hard for them? We also brought a comfort item for her, right? So like she takes her dino that lives in our car that she takes with her and comes home with us. And, something that I did too, and this is something I always highly recommend, the first day, she obviously had a very difficult time. I didn't wait. I literally emailed the first day. And obviously, I was very mindful about how I was approaching them. I didn't want to give all these suggestions and say all these things, considering what I do for work. But what I did was I reached out to them and I was like, she had a very difficult day. I was just wondering if you have any suggestions or how you typically handle this, when a child is struggling. And so right away, I'm like, I want to connect with the school. I want them to know that she's struggling so that they can obviously, connect with her and start building that feeling of safety. And I don't want to wait, right? I want to kind of get ahead of this so that we can problem solve for this. So we're not waiting until it becomes a bigger issue. And they were wonderful. They're like, get her to bring in a comfort item. If she wants to do less time, we can do less time for her, which we actually didn't have to do, which was great. But that was a big thing, right? So you really want to think about, what is the problem? How can I help my child problem solve for this? How can I help them build their abilities, their independence, their confidence, their sense of control? And how can I create that sense of security? Another thing I did for her specifically, and I'm just saying this because it might trigger something in your specific situation as you're listening, but I didn't want to rush out every time and go home and her have this negative association with school. So what we would do is we would have snack outside on that bench. So again, we're connecting to that bench where I'm like, this is where mommy sits and waits. She would have her snack there. And typically she would come out very upset. So it would give us time for her to re-regulate, where we're actually leaving the property where she's in a much calmer state versus her feeling super dysregulated and us rushing out. So again, I'm creating that sense of safety and calm in the environment that's triggering for her, so that she also has a memory of that. Sidebar, I also kind of created a little bit of a monster the first couple weeks because I would always have a shake for her at the end. So now she comes out and she's like, where's my shake? And clearly we are not buying her shake every day that I'm picking her up. So we did that in the beginning. So again, that kind of helped with her just adjusting to being there. But you can put these things into practice. And this is where you don't want to feel overwhelmed about it. If you have to sit and wait, if you're adjusting things and, other kids and other families aren't, it is not long term, right? It is short term things that you're doing to just help with that build up and that comfort. And the comparisons are terrible. Trust me, I did it. We all do it. We're human. Where I was like, everyone else's kid is fine. They're in there, and I'm like, I do this for work. Like, how is it that my child is having, a hard time? So as parents, we obviously kind of beat ourselves up about it and we compare. So I think really connecting to the fact that, your child is your child. They're unique. Every child needs different supports. They need different things. And we just need to focus on that and know that it's not forever, which goes into my third point. You want to stay the course, right? So you want to stay consistent with that predictability, with that routine. Again, I told you it took everything in me not to go and get her that day that I heard her crying the entire time she was there. Or it took everything in me not to keep her home some days because I'm like, maybe she needs a break. Like maybe it's too hard for her. It was also me not wanting to deal with the stress of drop offs and pickups, but I stayed consistent. And I think that predictability really helped for her. Also normalizing the process, right? So I still literally to this day, she's been in school for maybe 3, 4 weeks now. And she still, again, cries sometimes at pickups. And I just normalize that. I'm like, it's okay. I'm like, I know sometimes it's hard. You really miss me, right? And you kind of hold it on in all in. And then when you see me, you just really want mommy. Like, that's okay. So I normalize the process for her. I normalize that I'm like, yeah, yesterday you didn't cry. Today you did. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. So you really just kind of want to normalize the process for your kids as well, especially as they get older. This really, I think, is so crucial where it's like, there is no magic wand, right? Like things might get better and then we might have a little bit of a misstep, but it's okay, right? If we're continuously seeing that we're learning how to manage things better, the intensity isn't as strong, we're winning, we're moving in the right direction. You also want to celebrate wins. You want to celebrate their almost and their efforts. So something that also happens is sometimes we could get frustrated where we're like, okay, like things were better and now we're backtracking, or we've been practicing these things, why are you not implementing them? And I always have this visual of this one child that I don't even probably I don't know, I was early in my career, but I remember him and I actually weren't working on anxiety, but I just think about this with any emotion or any, struggle. But we were working on behaviors with him. And I remember he came into my office and he was like, there's no point in me trying. And I was like, hold on. I'm like, what do you mean there's no point in you trying? And he's like, I tried my hardest last week. And he's like, I usually would, beat up this kid and not get off of him, until someone literally pulled me off. And he's like, last week, I didn't hit him right away. I squeezed my fists, like I walked away. He's like, I did all these things. He's like, and then he kept poking at me and poking at me and poking at me. So he's like, I turned around and I smacked him. And he's like, and I still got in trouble for that. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, it took everything in me. He's like, I tried so hard. And he's like, and I didn't beat him up and I didn't react right away. And he's like, I used all the strategies. And he's like, and I was so close. And he's like, and it wasn't good enough. And I always imagine this conversation. I literally can still imagine his face. And I was like, yeah, some of our kids, I don't want to say some kids, but all of our kids, but sometimes our kids are trying their hardest and that is the best that they can do. And if it is not seen as good enough, it literally just defeats them and deflates them. So I look at my daughter and, of course, sometimes I'm like, okay, we're not going to cry today at pickup. And sometimes she does. And I'm just like, you know what? That is her best for today. It is what it is. So you want to celebrate those wins. So what I even do with her, and I'm like, it's okay. I'm like, you just cried for a little bit. It wasn't that bad, right? I'm like, or you didn't run over to me, right? You just had little tears. So I really, again, focus on the efforts. So this is something that you want to keep in mind as well. Focus on the efforts because it might not feel like it's good enough or it's enough or it's what we're hoping to see. But sometimes that is literally, they are giving it their all and that is the best that they can do in that moment. And you want to celebrate that. So we encourage them to try again and to keep going at it versus, them feeling defeated or deflated when we're like, well, no, like we were almost there. That wasn't good enough. So again, I like to keep this to 30 minutes. We're a little over, but hopefully those two categories really stood out for you. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you're thinking about in terms of implementing. And you have these three steps, right? So, how are you going to validate and connect to your child and help them connect to what they're feeling and why? How are you going to help them actually problem solve for this, build the abilities that they need to successfully manage it, and help them with the buildup? So, break it down into smaller, doable tasks. And again, stay the course, stay consistent, stay predictable, normalize the process, and celebrate those efforts and those almost. So, again, I hope this was super useful. I hope that you're leaving this episode or this video or this recording, whatever way you're watching it, and you're feeling just really good. You're feeling like, you know what? I understand this in a different way. I have strategies that I'm, going to use. I have things that I'm going to address. So, yeah, again, I really hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you have any thoughts on what else you'd like me to talk about in these episodes, depending obviously on where you're watching this, literally send us an email to info@Behavior Matters. Note that you listen to our podcast and that you have a suggestion for an episode topic, and that will make its way to me and definitely something that I will consider. So, again, thanks so much for logging on, for watching on YouTube, on Spotify, through our newsletter, Instagram channels, whatever way you found us. What I do want to end off with before I officially log off is if your child or your teen is really still struggling with anxiety and you're like, I love this and I need additional supports or I want additional supports, we obviously offer one-on-one supports at the clinic, but we also offer group programs. Our group programs are wonderful because it is small groups. They get to essentially be with other kids that are struggling with similar things. It helps with that exposure, that practice. They're in a group setting. It's an anxiety group, so we're very well aware of triggers and comfort and connection and all that good stuff. But it's an 8-week program and it really just teaches them the skills, the strategies to manage their anxiety, and it gives them the awareness they need to understand their anxiety. So we have those 8-week programs for kids and teens. We also have an 8-week program for parents. So you are their coach. And there is, if you like this, if you love this, there's so much more that I can give you in terms of strategies and supports and approaches to really just equip you to actually coach them through this and help them navigate their anxiety. So if you love this, if you're interested in this, again, reach out to us and we can give you the release dates for our parent 8-week program. And we have a 90-minute kind of one-off anxiety workshop that we do every so often. If you want to kind of dip your toe into this and see how you feel about a longer form, kind of more workshop style versus podcast style, you can sign up for that as well. So If you're interested in any of those things, again, you can obviously send us an email to info at behavior matters and just note that you listen to the podcast and that you're interested in, whatever program it is or learning more about the programs in general. So, again, thanks so much for listening, for tuning in. If you did like this, please subscribe, please share it. Again, it's free information. Hopefully, it's useful information. And just kind of your viewing, your likes, your shares, your subscriptions your subscribes, I don't even know how to say that, your subscribes obviously help with what we're trying to do here. So, with all that being said, I am going to log off now. Take care.